What's going on? All thanks for tuning in once again. Let's recap Itauma versus Whyte. Let's talk Itauma versus Parker. So Moses Itauma, takes care of business within one round. Reminded me of the Bacoli fight where Bacoli gets hit on the forehead, or on the top of the head, you could say, and his equilibrium's gone. He loses his balance, loses his legs, and that's the fight. That's basically what happened with Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte's not really a back-footed fighter, like I mentioned in my breakdown, and he was up against the ropes. Itauma was basically just picking his shots, going to the body, going to the head. Dillian Whyte couldn't really see where he was going because he had his arms up like a crossbar, similar to a George Foreman sort of style, where he has a crossbar defense, but he's also bobbing and weaving. Yes, I mean, it was more of an Archie Moore sort, where he's keeping low and he's got two hands crossbarred as defense, and this is something new. I've never seen Dillian Whyte with that sort of defense before. So he's doing this, unable to really land any punches against Itauma. He starts off trying to land the jab and he's falling short, because Itauma's just too fast for him. Jumping in and out of the pocket as he pleases and just flashing the hand speed at Dillian Whyte, confusing him, going to the body, going to the head, landing flush to the body, and then it's just a matter of time where Dillian Whyte decides to go low with the crossbar defense. Itauma catches him with a left hook and it lands on the top of the head. Then you see the legs go, you see Dillian Whyte sort of backing off, walking all over the show, His legs are completely gone, balance is gone, but he can't really regather himself because he's up against the ropes. Again, this isn't Canelo turning shots and countering, this is a guy that just, crossbar defense, and it's a matter of time before Itauma catches him with the right hand. I did mention that Itauma's two-handed, and that's basically what it was. He manages to get Dillian Whyte out of there within the first round. Now Dillian Whyte did get back to his feet, but again, his legs were completely gone. As he gets up, he stumbles backwards again. That's a clear signal of not being able to continue. Maybe he should have stayed down a bit longer and then tried to regather himself, so that he's not wobbling and tumbling all over the place. But, I think he was just in shock. He didn't expect the timer to get him out in the first round. We didn't expect it as well. It was a very one-sided dominant performance. Now, Dillian Whyte, never been stopped in one round before. I believe Fury took him 7 rounds or so. So, I mean, it's a great stoppage from Itauma. I know that Dillian Whyte has been inactive. You could say it's not the same Dillian Whyte, but, the name and the performance, he's managed to get 2 ticks and he's managed to impress the Saudi fans. People are calling Itauma versus Usyk. Now, Itauma's saying that he wants to fight Parker or Kabayao. He's acknowledged that he is on the waiting list. He has acknowledged that, it's not fair that he gets a shot before these other guys. So it's very likely that we will see Itauma versus Joseph Parker, just because Joseph Parker, Itauma, Itauma's just under him in the rankings in the WBO. Alexander Usyk's, I believe he's got an extension, something with an injury or some sort. He's asked for extension for the WBO mandatory. He's been granted it, from my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I highly doubt that Joseph Parker will wait around, and try to maybe fight someone else. I believe that the fight that Turkey wants to see is Parker versus Itauma. Most importantly, Itauma versus Usyk. But as I mentioned, Usyk's got an extension, something about an injury. So it's very likely that we will see Itauma versus Parker as the next fight. That's the fight that I'm guessing that will happen next. It's a good payday for Joe. As I mentioned, Turkey wants Moses as a main event. He wants him to fight Usyk. So it's basically the last bidden fighter to have a crack at Usyk. Itauma undefeated. So it's a strong possibility, in my opinion, that he will fight Joseph Parker. How does that fight go? It's an interesting one. Joseph Parker isn't really, as quick as he used to be, as we saw Itauma with the hand speed against Whyte. But then we haven't seen Itauma go past 6 rounds. So it's an interesting fight for sure. Both of them sort of like to go in and out of the pocket, don't really like to be fighting in the pocket for too long. So that fight's interesting. I think that fight will be a good one to watch. I'll definitely do a breakdown on that one if it gets announced. But just a recap of the Itauma fight. I thought that he was just far too quick, and Dillian Whyte just couldn't take that shot to the head. I mentioned the uppercut. This shot here was just one that got him on top of the head. Speed and power, that can do a lot to a fighter, heavyweight division. His legs just went from that shot. Itauma had great punch selection in this fight. He was going to the head, going to the body, very fast, showed his speed, showed that he has power. Didn't panic when he had Whyte on the ropes. Just came in and out of the pocket as he pleased, and managed to get him out of there in the first round. Great job, Itauma. I do see him fighting Parker next. Leave your take. Who do you think that he fights next? Do you think it was a great performance? Or do you think Dillian Whyte's washed? What are your thoughts? Leave it in the comment section. If not, thanks for tuning in anyway. And hopefully we will find out some news soon regarding Usyk and the rest of the heavyweight division. Thanks again for stopping in, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.